The lawyer's pen clicked. The sound cut through the office like a knife. My mother's hand didn't shake as she signed the papers. Not even a tremor. The inheritance, my father's house, his savings, the vineyard he spent 30 years building from bare dirt, all of it transferred to my brother, Evan. I shot to my feet. "You can't do this." She didn't even look at me, just kept her eyes on the document. "You don't need money, Tessa. You've always been taken care of." The lawyer's eyes darted to the floor. His pen dropped onto the mahogany desk with a soft thud. It was done. My pulse roared in my ears. 15 years of caring for my father. 15 years of driving him to appointments, managing his medications, sitting beside his hospital bed. All erased with a single signature. Evan sat across from her, arms crossed, wearing that smug little smile I'd seen my whole life. He didn't even try to hide it. Mom stood, smoothing her skirt. "We're finished here." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stood there, frozen. My name is Tessa Crowley. I'm 32 years old, a high school English teacher, and apparently an afterthought in my own family. When Dad died last spring, I thought his will would protect me. He'd always said everything would be split evenly between Evan and me. He promised. But Mom and Evan had other plans. I grew up knowing Evan was the favorite. It was never a secret. Mom fawned over him constantly, excusing every mistake, celebrating every small achievement like he'd cured cancer. When I got a promotion at the school, she said, "That's nice, honey. Don't rub it in around your brother, though. He's been struggling." When Evan crashed Dad's truck into a fence, drunk, she blamed the brakes. Dad saw through it. He'd pull me aside and whisper, "She'll see someday, Tess. She'll understand what you've done for this family." She never did. And now, sitting in that lawyer's office, I realized she never would. Evan was always the golden son. Even as kids, the pattern was clear. He could do no wrong. I could do nothing right. He failed out of college twice. Mom called it finding himself. I graduated with honors and became a teacher. She said it was a safe choice for someone like you. When he got arrested for a DUI, she paid his bail and told everyone it was a misunderstanding. When I stayed up late grading papers to help struggling students, she never noticed. Dad noticed, though. He'd sit with me in the evenings, sipping coffee, watching me work. "You're the strong one, Tess," he'd say. "You always have been." Those words kept me going through the hardest years. When Dad got sick, I moved back home to care for him. Evan visited twice in 2 years. Mom made excuses for him. "He's busy. He's got his own life." I had a life too. But I gave it up for Dad. And this was my reward. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got the call. "Your mother's making some adjustments to the estate," the lawyer said. His voice was careful, measured. I didn't think much of it. Estate paperwork always took time. I assumed it was just formalities. "Do I need to sign anything?" I asked. "Just come to the office Thursday at 2. When I arrived, Evan was already there. Sitting in the waiting room, scrolling through his phone, legs stretched out like he owned the place. He looked up when I walked in, smiled, not a friendly smile, a knowing one. My stomach twisted. Mom arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather folder. She greeted Evan with a kiss on the cheek. She nodded at me. Inside the lawyer's office, the papers were already laid out, pre-signed in places, pre-filled. I didn't understand what I was looking at until the lawyer started explaining, and by then, it was too late. That night, I sat on my apartment porch with Dad's photo in my lap. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the frame. I replayed every moment of that meeting. Her calm voice, Evan's smirk, the lawyer's apologetic tone that didn't match his actions. She'd looked proud of herself, like she'd finally corrected some cosmic imbalance only she could see. The vineyard, the house, the savings account Dad had built for both of us. All gone, not split, not reduced, gone. Transferred entirely to Evan, who'd barely visited Dad in his final years, who hadn't changed a single bedpan or refilled a single prescription. I thought about calling someone, a friend, a lawyer of my own. But who would believe me? My own mother had done this, in front of a lawyer, legally. I felt sick. I set the photo down and stared at the darkening sky. For the first time since Dad died, I cried. Not for him, for me. 3 days later, I went back to confront her. She was in the kitchen, making tea like nothing had happened. "Why?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. She didn't turn around, just kept pouring hot water into her cup. "Why what?" "You know what?" She sighed, finally facing me. Tessa, you don't understand how hard it is for men in this world. Evan needs stability. He needs a foundation. I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound. And I don't? You'll marry eventually. Someone will take care of you. My jaw tightened. I took care of Dad for years, while Evan was off doing God knows what. She stirred her tea slowly. You're being dramatic. This is what's best for the family. I stared at her, really looked at her, and I realized something horrible. She actually believed what she was saying. You took my future, I said quietly, and gave it to him. She smiled, a small, condescending smile. You'll thank me one day. I left before I said something I'd regret. Evan threw a dinner 2 weeks later to celebrate. Mom sat at the head of the table, acting like everything was normal, like she hadn't just gutted her own daughter. Evan invited a few friends, people I didn't know. They laughed too loud, drank too much. Halfway through the meal, Evan stood and raised his glass. To family, he said, grinning. And fresh starts. Everyone cheered. I raised my glass slowly, looked him dead in the eye. And to debts that come due, I said softly. The table went quiet. Evan's smile faltered. Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. I took a sip of wine. Just a toast. The conversation resumed, but the tension lingered. Evan watched me for the rest of the night, and I let him wonder. A week later, I was sorting through Dad's old papers in the attic. Mom had asked me to clear out his office, probably hoping I'd just throw everything away. But I read every page. Tucked between old tax returns, I found an envelope, yellowed, sealed. Written across the front in Dad's handwriting, for Tessa. Open if anything seems wrong. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note and a folded document. The note was short. Tessa, if you're reading this, something happened that I didn't plan for. The attached will draft is what I truly wanted. Make sure it's honored. I trust you. Dad. The will draft was dated 3 months before he died. It named me as primary trustee of the estate. Evan would receive his share only after meeting certain conditions, maintaining employment, staying sober for 1 year, and proving financial responsibility. This wasn't the will Mom had probated. This was different. And it had vanished. I called the lawyer the next morning. He hesitated when I asked about alternative will drafts. I can't discuss privileged matters, he said carefully. Even if there was fraud? Silence. Then quietly, your mother requested the new transfer documents just days before your father's final hospitalization. She said he'd changed his mind. My stomach turned. Did you see him sign anything? Another pause. No, but she had power of attorney. I hung up, mind racing. She'd moved fast. Too fast. Dad had been barely conscious those last few days. There's no way he could have authorized a complete transfer to Evan. She'd used his illness against him, and the lawyer had let her. That night I broke down completely. Not because of the money. I'd never cared much about money. But because I finally saw what I'd been refusing to believe my whole life. My mother didn't love me the same way she loved Evan. Maybe she never had. I thought about every dismissed achievement. Every time she'd prioritized his needs over mine. Every excuse she'd made for him while holding me to impossible standards. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about what was right. It was simply that I didn't matter to her. Not the way he did. I cried until I couldn't breathe. Then I stopped, wiped my face, and I made a decision. If she could manipulate the system, so could I. Legally, calmly, carefully. I wasn't going to scream or beg or plead. I was going to fight. I started reading everything I could find. Estate laws, probate transfers, trustee rights, power of attorney limitations. I called a different lawyer, one who didn't know my family. He listened to my story, reviewed the documents I'd found, and nodded slowly. This is complicated, he said. But if your father drafted a will that was never properly revoked, and if your mother exceeded her authority under power of attorney, you might have a case. Might? It'll take time. And evidence. I had time, and I was about to get evidence. I called Dad's accountant next. He'd managed the vineyard's finances for 20 years. Dad trusted him completely. I need to understand the estate structure, I told him. He hesitated. Your mother's handling everything now. I know, but some accounts were in my name too, weren't they? Silence, then. Yes, the vineyard's operating accounts. Your father added you as a co-signer 5 years ago. My heart jumped. Does Mom know? I don't think so. She hasn't asked. It wasn't much, but it was leverage. Meanwhile, Evan started posting on social media. Pictures of a new car, a luxury watch, vacation photos from Hawaii. People started commenting, asking questions. Where'd you get the money for all this? Didn't your dad just pass away? He deleted the comments, but the questions kept coming. I watched from a distance, saying nothing. Let him dig his own hole. 2 weeks later, I went to the bank to review my accounts. The manager pulled up my records and frowned. Miss Crowley, there was an attempt to access these funds last week. My blood ran cold. By who? Your brother. We stopped the transaction because his signature didn't match the authorization on file. He'd tried to forge my signature. I asked for copies of everything. The manager printed them without question. Evan wasn't just reckless, he was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. That afternoon, the lawyer called me. The same one who'd witnessed Mom's betrayal. His voice was quiet, strained. I need to tell you something, he said. Off the record. I held my breath. I haven't been able to sleep. What happened in that office, it wasn't right. Then why did you let it happen? Your mother insisted everything was legal. She had power of attorney, but I should have verified more carefully. He paused. The timeline doesn't add up. The documents were rushed. Your father never signed the final version. Can you testify to that? Another long pause. If it comes to it, yes. I thanked him and hung up. Everything was falling into place. I didn't confront them yet. Instead, I gathered everything quietly, methodically. Copies of the original will draft. Bank statements showing Evan's forged signature attempt. Witness statements from Dad's doctors confirming he was barely conscious during the time Mom claimed he authorized the transfer. Transaction logs showing Evan was already spending money that didn't legally belong to him. Let him dig deeper. The deeper he went, the harder the fall. Mom called me one night. Her voice was shaking. Tessa, Evan's in trouble. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What kind of trouble? Debt collectors. They're calling the house. He borrowed against the inheritance. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I stayed silent. Tessa, please, can you help him? Help him, I repeated slowly. The way you help me? She started crying. Don't be cruel. I hung up. A week later, there was a fundraiser at the community center. Mom was there playing the grieving widow, accepting condolences. She introduced me to someone as our family's modest daughter. I smiled, and apparently the only one who reads contracts. The woman looked confused. Mom's face went pale. People nearby turned to listen. What do you mean? The woman asked. Just that it's important to understand what you're signing, I said lightly, especially when it involves family. Mom grabbed my arm. Tessa, stop. I pulled away gently. I'm just making conversation, Mom. But the damage was done. People were whispering. The whispers grew louder when Evan's debt collector started calling Mom's friends. Then the accountant, unable to stay silent anymore, leaked the truth to a few key people. Dad's assets were being misused, and legally, I was still a partial trustee on several accounts. The rumors spread fast. Mom called me, furious. How could you embarrass us like this? I didn't do anything, I said calmly. Evan did. You're tearing this family apart. You did that the day you signed those papers. She hung up on me, but I knew she was starting to realize the truth. I could reverse everything, and she couldn't stop me. I invited them both to the vineyard, neutral ground, Dad's ground. Evan showed up hungover, eyes bloodshot. Mom came dressed like she was going to war. We sat in Dad's old office. I laid the documents on the desk between us. The original will draft, the bank statements, the timeline. This is what you signed, I said, pointing to Mom's papers. This is what Dad intended. I pointed to his will draft. Silence. Evan's face went white. Mom stared at the papers like they might bite her. You can't prove any of this, she said finally. I slid the lawyer's written statement across the desk. Her hands shook as she read it. Mom's voice cracked. You wouldn't do this to your brother. I looked at her evenly. You already did it to me. He'll lose everything. He's already losing everything. At least this way, it's legal. Evan stood suddenly, knocking his chair back. This is bullshit. Sit down, I said quietly. He stormed toward the door instead. Mom followed, crying. Not for me. Not for what she'd done. For him. Always for him. The door slammed. I sat in the silence, feeling strangely calm. My lawyer filed the appeal 2 weeks later. The case was straightforward. Mom had exceeded her authority under power of attorney by transferring assets Dad had specifically designated otherwise in a later will draft. Within a month, the fraudulent transfer was voided. Evan's accounts were frozen pending investigation. Mom refused to speak to me. Evan sent angry texts that I didn't read. It didn't matter. For the first time in my life, justice was actually being served. Evan's debts caught up with him fast. The car was repossessed. The luxury watch sold. He had to move out of the apartment he'd rented with Dad's money. He tried blaming Mom, then me, then the lawyer. But the truth was simple. He'd built his entire life on someone else's trust fund. And it finally collapsed. Mom tried to help him, but her own finances were limited. She'd been living off Dad's estate too. Now that was frozen as well, pending redistribution. They were both paying the price. I took over the vineyard operations, not for revenge, for Dad. Every corner of that land reminded me of who I was before the betrayal. Steady, patient, strong. I hired back the workers Evan had let go, restored the tasting room, replanted the damaged vines. Slowly, the vineyard came back to life. People in town started talking about it, about me, not as the forgotten daughter anymore, as the one who saved her father's legacy. A year later, Mom came to see me. She looked older, smaller, like she'd shrunk inside herself. "I just wanted to see the place," she whispered, standing at the vineyard's entrance. I let her in. We walked through the rows of vines in silence. The grapes were almost ready for harvest. I poured her a glass of the new vintage in Dad's office. She sipped it, tears in her eyes. "You were right," I said quietly. "Evan did need stability. He just had to lose everything to find it." She didn't answer, just stared at the wine. When she left, she didn't hug me, didn't apologize. But something in her eyes had changed. I watched her car disappear down the driveway. And for the first time since Dad died, I felt peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped needing her approval. I'd built something real, something that mattered, and that was enough.